He may be a freshman congressman, but he sounds like a veteran lawmaker. A conversation with Markwaybe Mullin is coming up on Green Country Perspectives. I'm Sam Jones, and this is my perspective. So you're standing in line in the grocery store and you hear somebody ask, "Do you have any Walt Whitman candy? I just love his sampler." We're around them every day. Folks who think that Walt Whitman makes chocolate candy. Now they're the same ones who didn't study in English Lit, so they assume dear old Walt is the Willy Wonka of their dreams, and he would have loved it. You see, Walt Whitman was a poet and a free spirit, a sort of original beatnik, in fact. He also broke all of the rules, and his life's work was ahead of its time. His collection of poems is known as Leaves of Grass. To say that he changed poetry would be an understatement. And while there's no real direct link between Walt Whitman and chocolate, there is a connection. Now, I'll admit it's a stretch, but let's see if I can help you understand where I'm headed. Now, one of my favorite Whitman poems flows in such a manner that even the dullest of wits will usually pause in recognition. It goes, "O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wrack. The prize we sought is won." Classic. But no chocolate connection. So let's try it again. Now first, find one of those little blank cards that you attach to gifts and write this. "Hither, my love, here I am, here. With this just sustained note, I announce myself to you. This gentle call is for you, my love, for you." That should do it. Now attach that card to a boxed Whitman sampler and give it to the love of your life. And the crowd goes wild. Now, I told you it would be a stretch, but keep the sampler in mind while I tell you a short but true story. You see, it all started when the Defense Department decided to hold what's considered to be its largest annual training exercise. It's a 3-month exercise that begins in July. It involves 1,500 to 2,000 troops from the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and Air Force, as well as members of the 82nd Airborne Division. Now, it's spread across 7 states. Texas is one of those states. Oklahoma is not. Thank goodness. Since our legislature gets most of its ideas of leadership from the Lone Star State, let me explain why I say that. It seems the internet has been buzzing with speculation that this U.S. military exercise I mentioned earlier is all part of a hostile takeover, and that the feds are coming after their guns down in Texas through martial law. The Republican governor on the other side of the Red River is a fellow by the name of Greg Abbott. Now, Governor Abbott has asked his state guard to closely monitor this U.S. military training exercise and report back to him. Now, it sounds to me like he's been spending unsupervised time on the internet again and believes everything he reads. I don't know much about him, but he sort of sounds like the uncle who shows up at every holiday dinner, gives you a snarky little grin, and says, "Pull my finger." Well, Governor Abbott's predecessor is Rick Perry, who wants to be president of these United States and is currently under indictment. Lots of history being made down there. Can you imagine the silly uproar if Oklahoma had been included in this military exercise? Now, there are many good people in Texas, and in an effort to help them out, I have a suggestion. Why don't we send both men a Whitman sampler with a note that says something like, "Hey, everything is going to be okay." The upside is the chocolate is really good. The downside is Rick Perry might say something like, "I didn't know Walt was still making candy," to which Governor Abbott might respond with, "You've got to be pulling my finger." I'm Sam Jones, and that's my perspective. And we're back with Congressman Markwaybe Mullin. And it is my first chance to sit down with you, and I welcome the opportunity. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a nice set you have here.
It gets it done. I want to start off, rather than jump headfirst into some issues with you. Talk about inexperience. You went from small town Oklahoma to Washington, insider, outsider, middle of the road, cider politics. It had to scramble your mind when you got there.
Well, it's kind of been the way it has my whole life. I went from one day going to a very small school in Westville where my entire family had went, and even my parents, to between 6th grade and 8th grade, going to 4 different schools. And you're always walking into a new environment. But it really prepares you to, take everything with a stride. Don't have over expectations. Just understand that the confidence is you'll figure it out. And then, finding myself in business at the age of 20 and just married, it all works the same way. Everything is just a day. You don't have too many highs and you don't have too many lows. You just be consistent and understand that give 100% that day, and the next day give another 100%.
How did, I'd be curious now, well, before I ask about that, you took the reins of a business actually started by your dad.
Right.
That had hit some tough times.
Yes, my dad's the hardest working man that you've ever met in your life. It was, his mentality is I want you to have a good education, but an education without a work ethic is absolutely nothing. And we didn't go out and have a whole lot of hobbies other than hunting, and working was our hobby. And Dad had some health issues, and was, and he, at the same time, he spent more time with me in high school than he did any other student or any other any other sibling that I have. I'm the youngest of 7. But at the same time, when his health wasn't there, he wasn't able to watch over the company like he used to, and the company that was rather successful fell into a lot of hard times. And
you stepped in and turned it around.
Well, my dad and I had a great relationship, and it's funny how the Lord works out. I was on a wrestling scholarship in Missouri, and absolutely thought that was what I was supposed to be doing. And in a year's time, I came back home, married my wife, got saved, and took over a business all in a matter of a short period of months. And it was one of those things that I look back and I don't know if I would be able to do it again. And I thought that was a very rough time. But as my dad said, you didn't start at water level. You started with your head underwater. And when you get through the day, you get up and you do it all over again enough, you just figure out that's just part of the day. And I tell everybody you can't grow in life unless you're a little uncomfortable.
So how did the wife take it when you walked through the front door and said, I'm running for Congress?
Well, I didn't tell her that. My wife and I make our decisions together. Now, I'm not going to say I've always done that, but it seems like we have a lot better relationship when she's included in the decision. This was such a big decision outside of what our norm was. My wife and I have had plans since we were just married that we were working on a 20-year goal. And we were 15 years into our 20-year goal. This wasn't one of those goal setting. This is just something that happened. She knows me also good enough that I'm not willing to gripe about something unless I'm going to get involved. I'm not a Monday morning quarterback. She had heard me gripe about it enough. And then, ironically, someone asked both of us if I would consider running. And we both said no, but they said if we'd pray about it. And part of my prayer was that, my wife has to be 100% involved with me. If she wants me to do this and she's not supporting me in this role, she's going to play as big a role as I am in it. And Christy was more passionate about it than I was probably once we knew that this is where we were supposed to be doing. And at that time, the decision was for both of us.
So you're heading one direction, and all of a sudden, whoa, it's like the old Yiddish saying, man plans and God laughs.
Yeah. That's so true, yeah.
Was it much of a shock when you hit the hill?
When I walked into the Capitol the first time, my wife and I were together, and we had already won the election. and we were having dinner with the other newly elected members in Statuary Hall. And I literally got goosebumps. I thought, wow, you know, God's amazing, but this wasn't anywhere in our plan. I was still learning how to tie a tie at that time, which I still don't like wearing them, evidently.
Well, my dad hated ties and short-handled shovels.
Hey, well, this is what I've told everybody. We might figure out what's wrong with DC because we keep choking ourselves with a piece of cloth around our neck. So anyways, it was quite a shock. When I walked in there, I thought, you know, Lord, this is pretty amazing, but now what? You know, you got me here, I've got the fire in my belly, but this is completely outside of my norm. You know, I come from strictly business, no political background. All these guys are extremely intelligent. They know what's going on in politics, what I have to offer. And I get up every morning and I pray that the Lord opens the doors He wants me to go through and shut the doors as He doesn't. And the door opened and I continue to walk through them. And, you know, it's been an interesting ride. Everybody says, "Are you having fun?" And I'll tell them, I'm not having fun, but I'm just glad I'm here. I'd rather be part of the decision making.
Was there any one issue that caused you to want to run?
Sure. March of 2011, we had a run-in with a federal agency, the EPA, that basically made me realize that my biggest threat to our company isn't the competitor down the road anymore. You know, I can manage a company. We have great employees. My team was just phenomenal. My leadership team at that time, which is still with me today, my CEO and CFO and COOs are all great people, but I can't control what's going to happen in Washington, D.C. And in a 1 week period, a company that we were running and gunning with that was doing awesome, which is one of several companies we had, was basically, for all intent and purpose, put out of business because of the EPA.
Really?
Had nothing to do with a fine that we received or something we was doing wrong. It's because of the president's initiative that he's going to create jobs through regulation. He created an industry that was through the water industry that started making municipalities that had compliant water treatment facilities, small municipalities, put them just out of compliance and forcing them to build new facilities. That jump took a business that we were operating in pretty well, took it and really made it difficult. And so we had to revamp an entire business. And that's when I realized.
Let me interrupt you just a second, Congressman. I'm kind of lost here. You're talking about a plumbing operation, and yet you're talking about a water supply?
Well, plumbing is just one of. We have Mullin Plumbing, but we also have an environmental company. We have an HVAC company. We have a lot of other companies that we operate in. And this one had to do with the treatment of wastewater and water. And in that treatment facility was basically put into a situation caught in the crosshairs of the EPA. And at that time, I realized, you know, if this is what's going to regulate me out of business, not my customer base, not my competitor is able to do it cheaper, more efficient, or have better employees, it's decisions that are being made in DC that's going to put me here, then that's where I need to go, is in DC. And so we started going through our business and looking at it and going, what in the world's going on here? Why, how did this happen to us? And so then I just started going through the company and figuring out how much does it cost us to comply with mandates and regulations that come from the state and federal business. I mean, I thought the hardest time in my life is when we first started and I took over a business with a lot of debt. Now this is, I was able to overcome that. I don't even know the face of the individual that put this business in trouble. So what does it cost me to comply? When I went through the company, I realized it cost us over 40 cents on every dollar that come in the company to comply with some mandate or regulation. 40 cents. That's amazing. And so I got challenged on MSNBC on this, and I told the host at the time, I said, I'll tell you what, I said, walk in my front door of my office, and we're going to walk down the hall, and you're going to see office after office with people that are trying to comply with some mandate or some regulation, either from OSHA or EPA or DEQ or the HR department, the federal labor laws, state labor laws, whatever it is that we're trying to deal with, you're going to see office after office. And I said, and we'll stop. The first place we'll stop is at our payroll department. And every dollar it costs me, over $20 an hour that I'm paying an employee, I'm just using a rough figure. An employee works 20 or 40 hours. I pay him $20 an hour. I should write him a check for $800. But then look at your paycheck and see everything that's added to that. Not just your paycheck, what you see deducted out of it, but understand the match that the employer has to have off of that. It adds up quick.
We're going to stop for just a moment, and we'll be back with more from the Congressman right after this. And we're back. Congressman, is it safe to say then that the EPA is in your crosshairs?
Well, the EPA definitely, but all these overreaching agencies, you know, it's not an area for entrepreneurs to thrive anymore. I mean, I feel sorry for businesses that are starting right now. I look back, as hard as it was for me, I look back and think, I still didn't have to worry about a federal agency coming in and writing me fines that are unheard of. Mm-hmm. I used to speak, even before I got into politics, I would speak at conventions all over the place. And I would ask business owners, not for the purpose of that I do now, but I would ask business owners, how many of you know for sure that you're complying with every regulation that is out there? And almost everybody would raise their hand. And the reason why I'd ask that question is because I would say, if you knowingly cheat a regulation, then your employees are watching the same thing, so don't be surprised if they cheat you. Now I ask the same question, but I'm meaning it for a political purpose. And I still talk to people all over the country, businesses from every walk of life. And I ask them, how many of you know for sure that you're complying with every mandate and regulation out there? And you won't have a hand go up.
You know, there was talk for a while that you and perhaps Congressman Bridenstine, and some other younger members of Congress had taken on marching orders from Senator Inhofe, who has declared open warfare on the EPA and makes no bones about it. And it has to do a lot with air standards, air quality standards.
Sure.
And on the one hand, you can understand where they're coming from. On the other hand, a lot of folks are saying, well, now, wait a minute, we got to do something about air quality. What's your take on that?
Well, at what cost? And as far as marching orders, Senator Inhofe and I work very close together. Both of us, if you pay attention to our stories, you hear his stories about what got him involved in politics and what he had to deal with in his business. Fast forward to us, and it seems very similar. And so him and I get along great. Senator Inhofe and I, we probably work together in our delegation more than any two members. But he is definitely right on target with understanding the cost that it brings to the American people at the EPA's agenda. I mean, where's the balance point? Where are we going to stop and say, okay, we have done a tremendous job cleaning up the environment, but at which point does it take its own animal? This is going to start getting real serious in our pocketbooks. With this EPA and the new clean standards for these power plants, we're going to lose roughly 70% of our coal-fired power plants in Oklahoma alone.
Is that a bad thing?
That's huge, because you look at what they're doing. They've got scrubbers on this. The technology has increased. The efficiency has increased. You're not seeing, coal blow out the top of these things. I remember when I went to the elementary school in Westville, when I first went there, they still burned coal for heat and air. Mm-hmm. I remember what that black stuff looked like. I mean, vaguely, they cut it out right as I was getting, I think by the time I was in third grade, they were done with it. But we, those of us that still remember, and I'm right on that cuff, but we still remember those black stacks coming out. You go by these plants now, you won't see anything coming out of these stacks. The what you do see coming out of it is actually H2O, and it's coming off is coming off just regular steam, not from the power plant itself. And so, at what point do we say is it going to cost? The average household is going to see, starting in 2017, is going to see roughly a 15%, starting in 2017, a 15% increase in their electrical bill. By 2025, businesses, the industry, is going to see a 33% increase. At what cost? Do we have the infrastructure to replace the 70% of coal-fired plants that are going to be going down?
Don't we need to do that, though? Don't we really need to take a harder stand? Don't businesses really need to clamp down on emissions around the world?
We have, but the rest of the world's got to go with us. We can't be doing it alone. Most of the pollution's coming out of Mexico and China right now anyways. And so at what cost are we doing it by ourselves? And take a look at the cost of a vehicle now because of emission standards. Costs of vehicles have skyrocketed. Take a look at equipment costs for the farmers and contractors like myself. The cost of equipment has went up an average of 20% up to 40%. That all gets passed on to the consumer. Let's talk about national security issues. National security, let's look at coal-fired power plants. We understand that the most vulnerable area that we have national security is our power grid. And we're going to be operating off of one source, two sources, three sources. We're losing coal-fired power plants. You can't build a new nuclear plant hardly at all right now. We're trying to build some, but the permitting system just isn't hardly working with us. Wind isn't always reliable.
Well, what's the solution? We know the grid's in trouble. We know that it's not going to hold up much longer at the current rate or current pace of demands. How can it be fixed?
Well, we don't start regulating the industry out that the president and his administration openly said they got a war on coal. You're going to put all your eggs in basically one basket with natural gas. Natural gas creates flexibility, or natural gas has a lot of ups and downs along the way. Luckily, we're blessed that we have plenty of natural gas, but we still should be diversified in our power system. The second thing, let's pay attention to it. Why regulate the business out of business? Why don't we pay attention to the power grid and the money that we're spending towards regulation? Why don't we spend it towards our infrastructure, the most vulnerable areas that we have? Why, instead of we closing down power plants, why are we costing people jobs when we could be creating more jobs by focusing on our infrastructure rather than picking winners and losers?
We got about 4 minutes.
All right.
And I want to get a couple more issues out on the table from you. Web safety.
Sure.
You're a big supporter. What's going on there?
You talking about with net neutrality or?
No, with kids.
Oh.
With the Google push that you were involved
Oh,
in.
okay. Sorry. You shifted gears on me a little fast there.
I'm bad about that.
Really, it's a way of life. I mean, my kids know how to work an iPhone better than I do now.
That's scary.
It is.
And I've faced the same thing.
And it's everywhere. It's where they're constantly being at, but that's also where the predators are at too. In understanding what's good and what's bad, understanding what can change your life forever by one picture, by one text, by how effective words can be, by understanding and recognizing predators and understanding sites. I think for the most part, kids are always going to be curious, but at the same time, we need to let them know what's lurking in the darks too. Google has put a great initiative out by going to middle schools, not high schools, middle schools, and teaching safety, understanding passwords, understanding what happens when you send a picture that you might think is funny. Stop and think before you push.
Because it's going to be there forever.
Yes.
I mean, there ain't no getting it back.
Once it goes, it goes, and you're not always going to be young. I think, how in the world is anybody that right now is my kids' age going to ever be able to run for office? Because one picture can change everything. And now, granted, I didn't understand the technology that we have today because we didn't have it then. But would I have been disciplined? We naturally fear things that we don't understand, so why don't educate the kids now? Start getting them to think a little bit before they do something so silly.
All right, let's move quickly to veterans if we could. We got a lot of veterans out there hurting.
Sure.
I have the feeling that what this country has failed to do for them is criminal.
Mm-hmm.
They come back suffering physical and emotional wounds wounds you can't see.
Right.
What can we do to help? What can Congress do to help?
Actually do what we say. You know, you hear so many elected officials that always say, we got to help our veterans, we got to help our veterans, we got to help our veterans. But if that was the case, then why aren't we funding it? Why aren't we putting the money where our mouth is always at? You know, these guys and these ladies fulfill their contract. They serve this country. They're the ones that allow me to do what I'm doing. If they didn't go first, I could never do what I'm doing. It is our duty to finish the contract that they started. You know, if they said they were going to serve an X amount of years, they did it, unless they were medical discharged. And if they were medically discharged, then that contract is still active, and that's something that we got to take care of.
Don't you think we too ought to change the thinking of the military machine so that they recognize the problems in the ranks and can couple them up and say to Congress, these guys and gals need help?
If we can allow them to do their job, absolutely. But if you'll talk to the VA system, they'll spend more time administrating paperwork, making sure they're complying with stuff that Congress put on them, than they do initiating the paperwork with the patient and paying attention to the patient. If we allow them to be the medical professionals that they are, to provide the medical needs, yeah, that'd be great. But we've got to get out of their way and let them do it. At the same time, we do got to allow them to be held accountable. But does Congress need to be the one that's constantly holding them accountable, or do we need to allow their supervisors the flexibility to hold them accountable? Do we need to allow the administrators the flexibility to hold them accountable?
It just seems like the one thing I have not seen or heard is some sort of bring in the 4 and 5 stars and let's ask them questions about how we can better help.
We do it all the time.
I'm sorry,
Right.
Congressman, they're telling me to get off.
Okay.
I talk too much. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're out of time. We'll see you next round.